Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to cover going over managing passwords in Linux. For this demo I'm going to be covering local passwords. To start off, we can use the passwd command by itself to reset the password of the currently logged in account. So my current password I want to set to, and confirm, and we're all set with the password reset. If I want to change another user's password, I can enter the passwd command followed by the username. Change Bob's password. As you can see, it complains here because we don't have access to read or write Bob's password data. In order to change another user's password, the user needs to be able to run the passwd command with root privileges. In this case, my account is granted ability to run commands as root through sudo policy, so I can change Bob's password by running sudo. And just enter the new password and confirm. And if it matches, we're all set and the password's updated. I'm going to demonstrate some of the other functions of the passwd command. The command can return the status of an account with -s. So if I run it without any other arguments, such as another user, it'll just return it on my account. So to read Bob's password information, I have to run with sudo. And we get info about Bob's account. It can also be run with the A flag. No user argument. And then we get a list of all users on the system and their status. So just to go through these fields real quick. First, we have the user that it applies to. Then we have the password status. He indicates an active password. The L shown here indicates that it is locked. And not shown here is NP, which means no password is currently set on the account. And we have a field that represents the last time the password was changed. The minimum age of the password, which is the number of days before the password can be changed again, and I'll talk more about this later. We have the max age, which is the number of days until the password expires. We have the warning timer, which is the number of days that it will start warning the user that their password is going to expire. And then we have the inactivity period here as the last number. And so this is the number of days after the password expires that will still allow the user to log in with that expired password, and they would have to change their password at that point. So as an example, if this was set to 3, that means 3 days beyond the password expiration, the user could log in and they would be prompted to change their password. Beyond that, then it would just tell them that their password is expired and they have to contact their system administrator to have the issue resolved. So in this instance, we have -1 here, which means that the user would not be blocked from logging in once they hit expiration. They will always be able to log in and be prompted to change that password. So if I run the passwd command with the D flag, it actually deletes the password and sets it to an empty password. So now we see that NP value here when we check the status. And if I switch to Bob's account, no prompt for a password, just logs right in. I'm going to fix that real quick here. Okay. Passwd command also has -e, which will expire the password, forcing the user to change their password at the next logon. A good use of this is if you have an admin that changes the user's password, that way they're not using the temporary password forever after that, or until that password expires. So Bob's password, if we change to Bob, now we're required to change it. So enter the current password, new password, and we're all set there now. An account password can also be locked using -L. This will only disable password authentication though. That doesn't disable the account completely. User can still log in using different method like an SSH key. And the status field will display an uppercase L like we saw earlier. I'll come back to disabling an account later, and we'll take a look at how that can be done. But for now, I'll just demonstrate that real quick. And we see that we're locked there. And even though I'm putting in the correct password, it's not accepting it. So with -u, we can unlock the account, or the password, I should say. And now it's back to P. And so password authentication is restored. There are additional options that can be run with the passwd command that I'm not going to demonstrate here, as I've covered or will be covering most of the concepts. But before moving on in relation to a note mentioned in the details of the passwd man page, the section that describes the lock option mentions the usermod command. Usermod can be used in combination with the expire option to disable an account. Passing 1 is suggested adds 1 day to the Unix epoch. So if we run through that real quick, and so now we have an account that's been disabled using that method. And I could have provided any past date in his argument, and that works fine too. I could have actually put in an entire date there and pass that to expire date. It's just easier to pass one. And I'm going to enable Bob's account again by passing a value of -1, which sets it to never expire. I could pass a valid future date in there for the account expiration to re-enable it as well. But just for example purposes, I'm going to pass -1 here. Now Bob's account is restored. Usermod has a few options that can be used for password-related functions, such as changing the password or locking and unlocking. I'm not going to cover it here since the rest of the password-related options overlap with what has already been covered. Another command we can use is the chage command, just change age. And so we can manipulate password settings or view information about the status of user accounts. I'm not going to do much demonstration since there's a lot of overlap with passwd and usermod. Like usermod, chage has the ability to disable an account by passing a value to the -e, that's uppercase E option. Also, chage has the ability to modify the password last change date by passing a value to the -d option, which might be helpful in some situations. The -l option provides similar output to passwd-s. It's labeled a little bit more descriptively, than the output's a little bit nicer. So for example, and then we get some information with the last change, when expires, inactive, and so on. If no options are given, chage runs against the account and prompts for the values. The number in brackets is the current value and will be unchanged if left blank. So we could change values that way. If we use the login.defs file, we can set some of these values globally. And we took a look at that in earlier videos when we looked at user and group administration. So if we just take another look at that real quick. And I'm going to look for this section. So we saw these values earlier and briefly discussed them when checking the status of accounts with passwd and chage. Those commands have options that allow an admin to adjust these values on individual accounts, and there might be a reason that an administrator occasionally needs to use that method. Outside of that, manually adjusting individual accounts should be avoided in favor of setting system-wide policy in login.defs. This is the default configuration after install. Any changes I make now will apply to new accounts. Existing accounts will retain their current settings. And just to clarify, this is a Debian install. I believe it's similar or the same on Red Hat. I would have to double check that, but you'll have to see what's set there and make adjustments as needed. And so if we're looking at the max age, this is how long a password is good until it expires. And so with that number of days, It might as well be forever. So I'm going to change that to something a little more reasonable. That seems like a more reasonable number. And minimum password age is set to 0. So it means it's not enforced. Earlier I discussed what this means, but I didn't get into the why. And so the purpose is to prevent users that were forced to change their password from immediately initiating a manual password change and setting it back to their previous password. And so I'll adjust that to 3 for now, and we'll revisit that later. And by default, the password warning timer, which is how many days before your password expires that it's going to start warning you that it's going to expire, is set to 7. I think a week's pretty good. And so adjusting the min and max settings can improve security, but there are some additional configuration changes that need to be implemented to really make this useful. With the current settings, there's nothing keeping track of previously used password. By default, the only restriction that is set on passwords is that it must be 6 characters long. And another issue is that there's nothing in place to lock an account due to multiple failed login attempts. And so to apply the remaining configuration, the PAM configuration will need to be adjusted. And that's something I'm going to cover in another video because that's going to require some explanation on its own, and it would make this video quite long. So I'm going to end it here. If you find my content helpful and you enjoyed this, please leave me a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate your support, and thanks for watching.